Why should you care about the history of Memorial Day and how does it apply to our world today? Ponder this and more on today's Panda Pondering. Welcome to the May 25th edition of Panda Ponderings. This is Phil coming back to you again with some information that you should know about and ponder on. Today's topic is Memorial Day. We all have a general knowledge of this being a holiday where we honor the men and women who have died while serving the U.S. military. But what do we know about its origin? Is this the same type of special day like what we would treat like National Donut Day? Or does it have a deeper meaning, a deeper significance to it? So I want to kind of talk a little bit about Memorial Day and the origin of Memorial Day, but I think it's important to know that Memorial Day came soon after the Civil War. Now, no, I'm not talking about like Iron Man versus Captain America, but what I'm talking about is the American Civil War, which was one of the bloodiest and most costly war ever fought on American soil. It's important to note that the Civil War began in conditions that are not so dissimilar to what's going on in our world today. And where we were back then should give us some pause for how we are today and whether or not we should continue our current course of actions or make some changes now to avoid the pitfalls that led us into a war of brother against brothers, of neighbors fighting. See, Memorial Day can show us the lessons that we learned from back then and how it can take hold today. So let's first start talking about the Civil War. The Civil War began in 1861, and there had been decades worth of simmering tensions between factions of people. Traditionally, the characterizations were northern states and southern states, but what you know is that there were neighbors who disagreed with one another, and it wasn't a simple thing as everyone in the northern states agreed and everyone in the southern states felt the opposite. See, the election of the President Abraham Lincoln caused 7 southern states to succeed and form the Confederate States of America. And shortly thereafter, 4 more states joined in. Now, prior to this point, in the mid-19th century, the United States was experiencing an era of tremendous growth. This growth was in industry and in a lot of manufacturing, but what you found out was that growth differed fundamentally in economics between the northern and southern regions of the country. See, in the north, the manufacturing industry was well established, and agriculture was limited to small scale farms. But in the South, the economy was based on the system of large scale farming, and that depended on labor of black slaves. And the rights of these blacks were at the forefront of the issues, no doubt. But you'll notice right alongside was the economic current that was pushing everything to the brink of conflict. See, all of a sudden, congressional legislation like the Kansas-Nebraska Act was passed, and then it led to violent conflicts, which became known as Bleeding Kansas. And then that led to a Republican Party that was formed. And, although that was the genesis of the Republican Party today, you'll notice that things are a little bit different now. But anyways, the political entity was founded on the principle of opposing slavery's extension into the newly forming Western territories. And this led to bitter political battles, which led to a Supreme Court ruling in the Dred Scott case, which then confirmed the legality of slavery in all territories, which then led to the John Brown raid at Harper's Ferry, which then continued to lead the separation of the Southerners from the northern neighbors who believed that they were being pushed into the brink of destruction economically. See, what I hope you're hearing is that although it's not the same situations, and I'm not equating what's going on in terms of the slavery and the plight of African Americans and blacks to what's going on now, but there are parallels between where America was in the mid-19th century and where we are today. We have conflicts in political beliefs. We have conflicts in the economy. We have political parties being thrown back and forth. We have legislation that is being passed that is partisan one way or another, and it creates a violent opposition across both sides. We have people taking things into their own hands and then creating a powder keg of a situation, escalating in tensions. We have states like California threatening to secede from the United States, and at the same way, we have Texas, threatening to secede as well, because they're on polar opposites, but they come up with the same idea of like succeeding in some sort of political stance. Make no mistake about it, friends. We're at a crossroads, deciding as a nation whether or not we are about to go to war with one another. The American Civil War ended officially on April 26, 1865, and approximately 800,000 Americans were killed in that war, with millions more injured. And more than half of our country was left in ruins physically and economically, but also mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. See, the first national commemoration of Memorial Day was at Arlington National Cemetery on May 30th, 1868. It was a place where both Union and Confederate soldiers were buried. But I also want you to see that image. That's where all those were buried. But what we also know was that there also have been known Memorial Days prior to 1868. As early as 1866, there were a number of reports of honoring the fallen soldiers of the Civil War. The official term at that time was called the Decoration Day, and it comes from the fact that they would decorate the graves. However, what's also lesser known is that there was a commemoration organized by a group of freed black slaves less than a month after the end of the Civil War in 1865. So this was the first known celebration of what is the modern day Memorial Day. And this clubhouse was at the location of the commemoration. It was at a racetrack at the Washington Race Course and Jockey Club in Charleston, South Carolina. And the Confederate Army had transformed this country club into a makeshift prison from Union captives. More than 260 Union soldiers died here, and their bodies were hastily buried in a mass grave behind the grandstands. When the war ended, one of the first things that the emancipated men and women did was to give these fallen Union soldiers a proper burial. They exhumed the mass graves and interred the bodies in a new cemetery with a tall whitewashed fence. And then on May 1st, 1865, a crowd of 10,000 people of mostly freed slaves with some white missionaries staged a parade around the racetrack. 3,000 black schoolchildren carried bouquets of flowers and sang John Brown's Body. Members of the 54th Massachusetts and other black Union regiments were in attendance and performed double-time marches, and black ministers recited verses from the Bible. What's important is this: Memorial Day came as a result of giving honor to those who paid the ultimate price of sacrificing their lives. For many, it was something that they believed in, and I think there were others that they were just caught up in the collateral cause of being conscripted into armies. But the real question is, did it need to get to that? I want you to ponder this. Conflict is good. It's not bad. But when people get so hardline about their position and there isn't reconciliation or resolution to the conflict, communities all around get pushed into the inevitable result of war. See, I'm always grateful to those who serve in the military. I'm grateful that there are women and men who take action into what it means to protect our freedoms. And make no mistake about it, freedom always comes at the cost of a fight. The thing is that those fights need not always come at the result of war, but often it is. Why? It's because we get positioned and we get stubborn about being right that we forget to engage in understanding and compassion. And instead, we push each other to the side of the brink of war. Today, we commemorate those who paid the ultimate price of their lives. Let's take today to think about the lessons from history. Remember, this isn't a comparison about what happened then and what happened now is equal in terms of the level of injustice going around. But I want you to think about this, that there are so many parallels to the climate of people in today's world as was at that time. And I think it's really important for us to remember that, because there are lessons that we need to take and heed so that we don't enter into the brink of war again. Once again, this is Panda Ponderings with Phil, and I hope this gives you something to ponder about. Take care, be informed, you have choice, and you have responsibility. Bye-bye.